The Shoshone guide, Sacagawea. She carried an empire west. Then the empire forgot she existed.
On the afternoon of May 14, 1805, a sudden, violent squall struck the Missouri River, catching the Corps of Discovery completely off guard. A sudden blast of wind struck the White Pirago, the boat carrying the expedition's most vital scientific instruments, medicines, and journals. The vessel's helmsman, a French-Canadian trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau, panicked and dropped the tiller, causing the boat to turn sideways and begin filling with freezing water. While the non-swimming frontiersmen aboard froze in terror, a 16-year-old indigenous girl, with a 3-month-old infant strapped to her back, remained entirely calm. Balancing herself in the rapidly sinking vessel, she leaned over the turbulent waters and methodically gathered the floating ledgers, compasses, and irreplaceable records. Without her quiet fortitude in that terrifying moment, the historical and scientific memory of the Lewis and Clark expedition might have been lost forever. Sacagawea, often spelled Sacagawea or Sacagawea, was an indigenous woman of the Lemhi Shoshone tribe who lived from approximately 1788 to 1812, though the exact year of her death remains a subject of intense historical debate. Born in the rugged terrain of the modern-day American West, she holds a unique nationality as a citizen of the Shoshone Nation, who inadvertently became a pivotal figure in early United States expansion. Her primary field of influence was exploration, cultural diplomacy, and translation. She is considered profoundly influential because she acted as a vital cultural broker, interpreter, and symbol as peace for the Lewis and Clark expedition. In a time when the Western frontier was a volatile landscape of clashing empires and powerful indigenous confederacies, her presence allowed a small band of American explorers to cross the continent and return alive, forever altering the geopolitical map of North America. Sacagawea was born around the year 1788 into the Agaidika, salmon eater, band of the Lemhi Shoshone. Her early world was located in the high, unforgiving elevations of the Lemhi River Valley, nestled in present-day Idaho near the Bitterroot Mountains. Her childhood was defined by the seasonal rhythms of a nomadic hunter-gatherer society. The Shoshone followed the migrations of game and the blooming of edible flora, moving carefully through territories highly contested by rival tribes. The economic and political environment of the Great Plains and the Rockies was undergoing massive shifts due to the introduction of the horse and the gradual arrival of European firearms, which the Shoshone largely lacked. In the late summer or fall of 1800, when Sacagawea was roughly 12 years old, her life was violently upended. A raiding party of Hidatsa warriors attacked her tribe's encampment near the Three Forks of the Missouri River. During the chaotic skirmish, 4 Shoshone men, 4 women, and several boys were killed. Sacagawea, along with several other girls, was taken captive and marched hundreds of miles east to the Auataxa Hidatsa villages, near present-day Washburn, North Dakota. The transition from a free Shoshone child to a captive in a foreign land fundamentally shaped her survival instincts and linguistic abilities. The Hidatsa were a sedentary, agricultural people who lived in large, fortified earth lodge villages along the Mississippi River, a massive trade hub connecting French, British, and indigenous merchants. Forced to assimilate, Sacagawea had to quickly learn the Hidatsa language and adapt to an entirely different cultural and agricultural lifestyle. Sometime between 1803 and 1804, she was either purchased, traded for, or won in a gambling match by Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian trapper in his mid-40s. She became one of his 2 captive wives. This harrowing period of her youth, defined by enslavement, forced marriage, and displacement, paradoxically equipped her with the exact combination of skills, resilience, cross-cultural understanding, and multilingualism that would soon make her indispensable to the United States government. Sacagawea's movement from the shadows of captivity to historical prominence began in the freezing autumn of 1804. President Thomas Jefferson had commissioned a $2,500 military and scientific expedition to explore the newly acquired Louisiana Purchase and find a navigable water route to the Pacific Ocean. Led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the Corps of Discovery arrived at the Mandan Hidatsa villages and constructed Fort Mandan to survive the brutal winter. The American captains knew their grand expedition would fail if they could not acquire horses to cross the formidable Rocky Mountains, a territory controlled by the Shoshone. Upon learning that Charbonneau's pregnant teenage wife was a native Shoshone speaker, the captains immediately saw her strategic value. On November 4, 1804, Charbonneau was officially hired as an interpreter, with the explicit understanding that Sacagawea would accompany them. Overnight, a 16-year-old captive became a critical asset to a military vanguard. Sacagawea's true breakthrough occurred during immense physical vulnerability that transformed into her greatest strength. On February 11, 1805, inside the freezing walls of Fort Mandan, she endured a long and agonizing labor. To hasten the delivery, a French-Canadian trader named René Jasome administered a folk remedy, a crushed rattlesnake rattle mixed with water. Shortly after, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, whom Clark affectionately nicknamed Pompey. When the expedition finally departed Fort Mandan on April 7, 1805, the party consisted of 33 permanent members. Sacagawea was the only woman. As they pushed into the unknown wilderness, she proved her worth almost immediately. She supplemented their meat-heavy diets by identifying and digging up edible prairie turnips, wild licorice, and fennel. More importantly, her presence carrying a newborn baby became an unintentional masterstroke of diplomacy. As Clark later noted in his journals, a woman traveling with an infant was a universal sign of peace, signaling to the more than 50 different tribes they encountered that this heavily armed military unit was not a war party. Sacagawea's journey is punctuated by several critical historical moments that directly ensured the expedition's success. May 14, 1805, she rescued the expedition's journals and instruments from the capsized pirogue, an act that earned her Lewis's profound respect. August 15 to 17, 1805, the expedition finally reached Shoshone territory. In a stunning historical coincidence, the leader of the Shoshone band they encountered, Chief Kamiawat, was Sacagawea's biological brother. After an emotional reunion, she facilitated a complex translation chain, speaking Shoshone to her brother, translating to Hidatsa for Charbonneau, who spoke in French to a soldier, who then translated to English for the captains. Through this grueling process, she helped secure 29 horses, without which the men would have died in the Bitterroot Mountains. November 24, 1805. After enduring starvation and freezing rains, the expedition reached the Pacific Ocean. When the captains asked the crew to vote on where to build their winter quarters, Fort Clatsop, Sacagawea and York, an enslaved black man, were allowed to cast their votes. It was a fleeting but remarkable moment of democratic equality. July 1806. On the return journey, she actively guided Clark through the Gallatin Valley and recommended crossing the Rocky Mountains via what is now known as Bozeman Pass, demonstrating her deep spatial memory of her childhood homelands. In August 1806, the expedition returned to the Mandan villages. Charbonneau was paid $500.33 and granted 320 acres of land. Sacagawea received no monetary compensation. Sacagawea is best known as the Native American woman who guided the Lewis and Clark expedition. However, this reputation was heavily shaped by later media and political movements. For nearly a century after the journey, she was a mere footnote in American history. Her fame exploded in 1902 with the publication of Eva Emery Dye's novel The Conquest, which deeply romanticized Sacagawea and transformed her into a trailblazing feminist icon for the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Suffragists like Anna Howard Shaw used her image to argue that if a woman could lead the nation's greatest explorers to the Pacific, women surely deserved the right to vote. While historians quickly clarified that she was not a guide in the sense of a pathfinder leading them through unknown wilderness, she was a passenger in unmapped territories just as much as the men, her fame endured. Her true, verified legacy as an indispensable cultural ambassador, interpreter, and symbol of endurance outshone the myths, making her name synonymous with the spirit of the American West. Understanding Sacagawea, the human being, requires reading between the lines of military journals. The captains described her as remarkably stoic, calm under pressure, and highly observant. Her motivations are historically complex. She was not an eager patriot volunteering for an American cause. She was a captive teenager bound to an older husband, effectively ordered to march across a continent. Yet she displayed an extraordinary will to survive and a deep dedication to her child. She never once complained of the freezing temperatures, the starvation in the mountains, or the exhaustion of walking thousands of miles with a baby on her back. When she fell severely ill in June 1805, she endured the pain quietly. She also possessed a deep curiosity. When the expedition reached the Pacific, she explicitly demanded to accompany a party to see a beached whale, arguing that she had traveled a great distance and deserved to see the ocean and the monstrous fish. This reveals a woman of agency, intelligence, and intellectual hunger, navigating a world where she had little legal or social power. The life of Sacagawea is surrounded by profound conflict, not the least of which is the controversy over her own death. Because she was marginalized in her time, historical records of her later life are fragmented and highly debated. According to contemporary written accounts, Charbonneau and Sacagawea traveled to St. Louis in 1809, leaving Jean-Baptiste in the care of William Clark. By 1812, she was living at Fort Manuel Lisa in present-day South Dakota. A clerk named John Luttig recorded on December 20, 1812, that the wife of Charbonneau, a snake squaw, died of a putrid fever at age 25. Furthermore, William Clark's 1825 ledger of expedition members explicitly lists Sacagawea as dead. Most academic historians accept this as verified. However, a fierce conflict regarding this timeline exists. Shoshone oral traditions heavily dispute the 1812 death. Supported by a 1925 report compiled by Dr. Charles Eastman for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, oral histories assert that the woman who died in 1812 was Charbonneau's other wife. They claim Sacagawea left Charbonneau, lived among the Comanches, married, and eventually returned to the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, dying in 1884 at the age of 96. This debate causes ongoing friction between academic historians relying on Euro-American documentation and indigenous scholars defending the validity of tribal oral histories. Beyond this debate, her legacy faces modern criticism. Some view her as a tragic pawn of colonialism, an enslaved girl whose immense talents were exploited to pave the way for the devastating ideology of manifest destiny.
Sacagawea's immediate impact was the physical survival of the 33 permanent members of the Corps of Discovery. Without her translation skills, they would not have acquired the horses necessary to cross the continental divide, and without her presence, they likely would have been attacked by nervous tribal factions. Her long-term influence, however, shaped the entire continent. By ensuring the success of the Lewis and Clark expedition, she inadvertently helped the United States solidify its territorial claims to the Pacific Northwest, effectively countering British and Spanish ambitions in the region. The economic and political impact was staggering, accelerating the westward expansion of white settlers.
However, this impact carries a heavy, tragic consequence. The trails she helped open brought diseases, military campaigns, and systemic colonization that ultimately decimated the indigenous populations of the plains and the West, including her own Shoshone people. Her life represents the complex, dual-edged nature of history, where a personal triumph of survival contributed to the collective tragedy of her native ancestors.
Today, Sacagawea is arguably the most memorialized woman in the United States. Her legacy is literally carved into the American landscape. There are more statues dedicated to her than any other American woman. Her name marks rivers, lakes, and schools, and honors like Sacagawea Peak, a 13,666-foot mountain in Wyoming. In the year 2000, the United States Mint released the Sacagawea Golden Dollar, featuring a rendering of her with baby Jan Baptiste on her back, ensuring her face passed through the hands of millions of Americans daily. Over time, her image has evolved from a marginalized native wife to a romanticized feminist pioneer, and finally to a nuanced symbol of resilience, trauma, and maternal strength. She is no longer viewed merely as a prop in the story of great white men, but as a central, indispensable architect of the expedition's survival. Her legacy sparks ongoing discussions about human trafficking, indigenous rights, and the ways in which women's history has been both erased and commodified. Sacagawea's life reveals the astonishing endurance of the human spirit in the face of absolute powerlessness. She was a kidnapped child, forced into marriage, and thrust into an agonizing 4,000-mile journey across treacherous, unmapped wilderness. Yet, she did not merely survive. She adapted, translated, negotiated, and thrived. Her story forces us to look past the sanitized myths of American expansion and recognize the brutal, colliding worlds of empires and indigenous nations.
Her intelligence and calm courage bridged the gap between two deeply foreign cultures, proving that the most profound acts of historical influence are often born not from the ambitions of conquering politicians, but from the quiet, relentless resilience of those just trying to survive.